When a beloved video game classic gets a second shot at life, it's usually cause for some cautious celebration.
Cautious is the right word. But what happens when that second chance only comes after a highly criticized, very public initial reveal?
Then the stakes, they just become monumental. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the complete internal reboot of the Prince of Persia.
Yeah.
The Sands of Time remake.
Yeah, and we've gathered a lot of source material that maps out this whole dramatic journey. I mean, everything from the fan rejection and the huge development shift that followed,
all the way down to leaked gameplay features, and, maybe most importantly, the high-pressure business reasons behind a very specific, very soon release date in January 2026.
Right.
Okay, so let's define our mission here. The goal is to really understand how a major project goes from this kind of public relations disaster to a full internal reboot.
And to tackle that bigger picture question, why the success of this one remake has become the litmus test for an entire dormant franchise's future.
It's a lot to carry.
It is. And what's fascinating to me is that the effort wasn't just about fixing some technical stuff. We're seeing a major corporate course correction here.
One that spans years.
Exactly, years, and shifting who's in charge internally. Which brings up a big question for you listening. What level of graphical fidelity, what kind of mechanical overhaul is really required to make a modern remake successful?
Especially when the original is already so legendary. That nostalgia, that's a really tough benchmark to meet.
Yeah, it really is.
So let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to that moment of, initial failure. The remake was first announced in September 2020.
And Ubisoft, maybe a bit too optimistic, was targeting a really quick launch for January 2021.
But then they showed the first trailer. And the reaction was immediate and just brutal.
The feedback was so intense. I mean, it was almost unprecedented. Our sources show the criticism wasn't really about the gameplay ideas.
No, everyone loves the time rewind, the parkour.
Right. It was purely visual. Fans felt the game looked, dated. Almost like an early PlayStation 3 title.
Stiff character models, flat textures. It just didn't do justice to the original's legacy at all.
It failed to meet the visual expectations that other big remakes had already set. Simple as that.
So, with that instant fan rejection, Ubisoft had a choice. They could release it quickly in 2021 and just, take the hit.
Or delay it, but they chose something much, much more drastic than a simple delay.
We chose a complete overhaul.
And this is where that pivotal studio switch happens, which is really significant if you follow the corporate politics of it all.
The project was originally with the Ubisoft studios in Mumbai and Pune.
Both very talented teams, but they aren't the ones you typically associate with Ubisoft's, let's say, marquee narrative action games.
So after that 2021 backlash, the company decides to pull the project entirely. They transfer everything over to Ubisoft Montreal.
And you have to tell us why that specific move matters so much, because it is a massive signal of intent.
It's the signal. Montreal is the flagship studio for this franchise's DNA. This is the team that actually created and released the original Sands of Time.
Back in 2003.
Exactly. So bringing the project back home was Ubisoft's public way of saying, okay, we hear you, only the original creators can salvage this.
It was a very clear, very high-stakes move to put their most trusted veterans on the job.
And it wasn't just a handoff. The sources all confirm this was a complete development restart.
Not just refreshing some old assets.
No, they literally threw out the old work. We're talking new animations, completely reworked mechanics for combat and parkour.
And even new casting for the Prince and Princess Farah. New voices, new motion capture, the whole 9 yards.
That kind of internal restart costs a fortune. And it burns so much time. It just shows how seriously Ubisoft took that fan criticism.
But here's the thing. While they fixed the who and the what, they now face the ultimate pressure of the when.
Bringing it home doesn't solve the time problem.
No, in fact, it compresses it dramatically.
Okay, let's pivot to that high-stakes timeline, because we're not dealing with vague promises anymore.
Not at all.
Insider reports, particularly from the very reliable Tom Henderson, have suggested not just mid-January 2026, but they've narrowed it down to a specific date.
January 16th, 2026.
And if you're listening to this today, December 13th, 2025, that means this game, a game that was essentially reborn from its own ashes,
Is scheduled to launch in less than 50 days.
It's a simultaneous launch, too. PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC, all at once. That is an incredibly tight turnaround.
Which immediately raises a critical question.
Right. if they spent years fixing the mistakes of 2021, why are they now rushing this thing out the door in January?
Doesn't that risk making the same mistake all over again, where speed gets prioritized over quality?
It's a completely fair question. And the sources seem to clarify that this January date is being dictated almost entirely by corporate strategy, by finance.
Not necessarily by game readiness, though you'd have to assume they're very close to ready.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, there are two sort of non-negotiable reasons for this deadline.
Let's start with the first one.
The first reason has to do with their internal release schedule, their hierarchy. Ubisoft has apparently made it clear that the Prince of Persia remake must come out before the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake.
Which is a huge title for them.
A monster. They need to test the waters and reestablish the Prince of Persia brand before they bring out one of their biggest heavy hitters.
So it's about not cannibalizing their own audience, sure, but also about setting up a new product line before the juggernaut arrives.
And the second reason is maybe the most crucial detail in this entire story.
Yeah.
It's about the company's bottom line.
Absolutely. The second reason is that it has to hit the fiscal year 2025-26 deadline, which ends on March 31st, 2026.
And Ubisoft has been struggling financially, that's no secret. They've had major delays, some titles that underperform.
So they need a guaranteed win. They need that influx of revenue to stabilize their balance sheet for the investors.
Hitting that January 16th date ensures all the sales revenue lands squarely within that essential corporate quarter. It's a huge piece of their financial recovery strategy.
So this isn't just about satisfying nostalgic fans.
No, it's about stabilizing the entire company's revenue forecast for the year. And that puts an unbelievable amount of weight on this one single title.
Precisely. And that pressure leads to one of the most curious details in the source material, what I'd call the marketing mystery.
Right, because despite this looming deadline and these massive corporate stakes, the official Prince of Persia social media account explicitly confirmed the remake would not be at the Game Awards 2025.
Which just happened a few days ago on December 11th.
That silence is just deafening. I mean, a AAA remake of this size would normally get a multi-million-dollar marketing blitz.
Months of it. So what does this suggest about Ubisoft's strategy?
The prevailing theory seems to be risk mitigation. A minimal marketing campaign, what some gamers call a shadow drop approach.
Where the announcement comes very close to the actual release.
Exactly. Since that initial 2020 trailer created such a firestorm of bad publicity, Ubisoft may be choosing to minimize the window for any new criticism.
They don't want a single frame of new footage getting picked apart and magnified online for weeks before launch.
So it's a calculated gamble. Instead of spending millions on a long marketing campaign, they might just rely on the reviews hitting close to launch.
They're betting that the quality will speak for itself. It signals a lot of confidence in the final product, but it's a very, very unusual play.
Especially given the 5 years of development hell this project has been through.
It is. They're putting all their chips on the quality, hoping the news of the original devs returning, and the promise of a complete modernization will be enough.
Which brings us to the actual game. Let's pivot from the business strategy to the creative decisions they made during this restart. What does genuine modernization actually look like?
Well, our understanding is grounded in that leaked gameplay footage from a focus group screening back in April 2024.
And those leaks were so important, they showed the team didn't just, up-res the textures.
No, they fundamentally changed how you interact with the world. The combat overhaul is probably the most dramatic difference.
The original combat was functional? It was fine for 2003. A simple lock-on system, some repetitive combos.
Very much a product of its time. It was more about crowd control than, say, dynamic skill expression.
Right.
Exactly. The modernized combat now has far more dynamic and acrobatic moves. It incorporates the environment and your parkour skills directly into the fights.
We're talking a broader range of attacks, counters, environmental finishers, that kind of thing.
The goal, according to our sources, is to bring the game up to modern action-adventure standards. So, think less rigid fighting and more fluid, cinematic, and smooth choreography that flows directly from the parkour.
So if you're wall running to get away from enemies, you could maybe launch a vertical attack or a drop-down strike right from the wall.
Instead of having to land first and then start a separate combat sequence.
That continuous flow is what players demand today.
That is the key distinction. And on top of that, the core identity of the game, the parkour and the puzzles, has also been significantly refined.
It's not just about running from point A to B.
No, the physics and animation systems have been built from the ground up to feel intuitive and responsive. They want complex traversal to feel like second nature.
And what about the iconic feature? The Dagger of Time. How has the time rewind mechanic been modernized?
The basic function is the same, rewind mistakes, slow time, but the integration is seamless. They've polished it so it feels interconnected with the smoother gameplay.
In the original, using the dagger sometimes felt like pressing pause. It stopped the action while you corrected a mistake.
Right. In the remake, the sources suggest it's far more fluid. It weaves naturally into both combat and high-stakes platforming without breaking your immersion. It's a genuine mechanical modernization, not just a simple port.
And beyond the mechanics, the initial criticism was so heavily focused on the visuals. What's been done to make sure this looks like a 2026 title?
Everything related to presentation is new. They scrapped the old motion capture, the old cinematics, all of it.
Which is why they needed the fresh voiceover sessions with the new actors for the Prince and Pharaoh.
Yep. The goal isn't just photorealism, it's to deliver an experience that feels authentic to the tone of the original story, while hitting that modern visual fidelity. They are walking an impossible tightrope between satisfying deep nostalgia and meeting contemporary graphical standards.
Okay, so we've tracked the dramatic turnaround, the massive investment, and the specific gameplay changes. Now we have to ask what it all ultimately means.
This remake is so much more than a one-off attempt to cash in on nostalgia.
For all intents and purposes, it is a foundational step for the entire Prince of Persia franchise.
The consequences of this January 16th launch are just massive. Industry insiders are very clear about this. The success of the Sands of Time remake directly determines whether Ubisoft commits more resources to the franchise.
If it does well, commercially and critically.
They are reportedly ready to greenlight full remakes of the sequels.
Which means we could finally see modern versions of Prince of Persia, Warrior Within, and The Two Thrones.
It is effectively a test run that could determine the next decade of the franchise.
And the reason this is so critical, it all circles back to Ubisoft's corporate health.
As we mentioned, they've been struggling with consistent financial hits, and critical reception hasn't always been stellar in recent years.
So this remake, along with a few other big titles like Assassin's Creed Shadows, is positioned as a pillar of their strategy.
A strategy to stabilize their financial portfolio and rekindle confidence in their own library of intellectual property.
So the success of Sands of Time isn't just about giving fans a good game. It's about creating the revenue and the goodwill needed to justify spending on those next two sequels.
And ultimately, ensuring future corporate stability. It truly is a corporate lifeline project. The weight of those future games and the company's balance sheet is all resting on a game that launches in less than 50 days.
After nearly 5 years of controversy and development purgatory.
It has to be a home run to restart that momentum.
What a story. To recap, the game went from a disastrous, heavily criticized reveal in 2020 to a complete development restart under the original Sands of Time creators.
It's now barreling toward a hard January 16th, 2026 launch, less than 2 months away.
Featuring completely reworked combat, parkour, and presentation. All because it serves as this crucial launchpad for the entire franchise's future and Ubisoft's own fiscal recovery.
The whole history of this project shows you the sheer power of audience criticism and the incredible financial commitment a major corporation has to make to truly acknowledge failure and correct its course. But given the high stakes and the tight deadline they've been forced into, the crucial question for you, the listener, and for the whole industry isn't just whether the remake is technically good.
It's something bigger.
It's whether any amount of frantic, high-quality development can truly erase the collective memory of a disastrous first impression, and what kind of psychological pressure that puts on the developers as they approach the finish line.
That pressure cooker environment is the final unseen layer of this whole story. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of the biggest gaming comeback stories we've seen in a while.
We hope this gave you a detailed look into why this specific remake matters so much right now.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.